first one was that we delay the half-cent sales tax portion of the CIB. Yeah,
Correct.
yes, Mr. Council, City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to maybe suggest that for each of these items, we possibly have the appropriate staff member get up and talk about what the particular impacts of that would be.
Yeah, I agree. I think, okay, so if we're taking, we'll look at this one here, and, I don't know, is there 2 pages? Or this
There are
is-
2 pages.
All
The
right.
top, the long page is the items that would carry through, but it's a copy of what I shared.
Okay,
The second one has the motions.
so this, the first one is on,
Half cent.
the half-cent sales tax, okay, amendments to that, we take, or we delay that particular portion. Maybe if everyone is aware of that in general, we could go to the staff. Mr. Whitaker, if you would like to, was that correct, City Manager?
Yes, sir.
The first item, you were talking on the half-cent sales tax, and you had a,
Now, and,
Oh,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
now I can read it, and that, maybe that would be helpful. Defer the entire half-cent sales tax budget until September 16th in order for reporting, budget, and expectations to be discussed and reconciled before a vote is taken.
okay. I mean, delaying each of these projects is the purpose. We were trying to bring them forward is to, you know, for planning reasons, to be able to plan ahead and get a head start on the project so that when we go into the new year, we can be rolling on the projects instead of like, I don't know what happened in 13, but this year we didn't vote on them till late January. And so then we couldn't really start anything till February or March, because then we have to go out if we need to secure design services, et cetera. And so that was our reasoning of trying to, you know, come in earlier with the CIP, is to be able to plan in the fall to get ready for the new year.
Okay, yeah, Mrs. Everhart, Deputy Mayor.
Was there a second on her motion? Or is this a motion?
Okay, let's do this as a motion. It would best to do this. We'll say that, Ms. Hilbert.
So moved.
So moves this motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Mrs. Ortiz seconds. Ms. Everhart.
Well, I'm going to oppose this because I think this would be absolutely not something that people would want to see happen in my district, a delay of projects. And that's exactly what this would create, a delay in projects. So we had that happen in the past. I've been able to get accurate information. I'm not sure. I think those are good points that the councilwoman brings up, and hopefully that can be cleared up for her. But I don't want to see us postpone anything on infrastructure, street work that the citizens are expecting to have happen with their half-cent sales tax dollars, maintenance. I just think that would be a terrible road to go down. I mean, overall, I think, I guess I'm also gonna just go ahead and speak to the idea of the 3-year. I think that's great that we're moving in that direction. When I first got on council, all I heard was, why don't we have long-range planning? Why don't we do more planning? And that's exactly what you guys are now trying to do. And it was very confusing for people in my district when we were under the 2-year and they'd think a project was gonna get done and it didn't get done because maybe the right-of-way hadn't been purchased. And people, you know, you're cleaning up messes that happened maybe previously, but knowing this is design, this is when we do the right-of-way purchase, and this is when construction begins, is clear and transparent. And people in my district, I think, would be all for that. But at this point, speaking to this motion, I oppose this because I think it will delay a lot of street projects that are sorely needed.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Ortiz?
Now, Doug, you said that part of the delay was when we got to vote on it, correct? Is that what you said? When it was presented to the council, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, this year, the design, you know, doing the 2014 projects and lists didn't come in until after, you know, it was like late January of
But
2014.
whose fault is that it got to us to vote on? I don't know if that's questions for you or for staff. I mean, where's the breakdown?
Yeah, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Ortiz. possibly it was us. Well, I'll take the fall on that. Maybe we didn't get it to you fast enough. But that's not just the issue. The issue is because of the way, the time that it takes to do the design, to do the utility relocation, to do everything else, we weren't getting it done in time, and then we were rushing to get projects finished and not doing it. So, yes, we are, there are a lot of issues that we've been cleaning up from a design engineering project perspective, and I think that we will all agree we're making progress, but we have a very long way to go. So yes, I accept that we need to get some
I'm-
things in earlier.
If I may, Mr.
Sure.
I'm not trying to criticize, I'm just saying if the process is not broke and we're doing something wrong, because my concern is on street projects from, and I'll talk past, if they didn't get done, then they went into the next year, am I correct? And then sometimes when they went to the next year or the next year, then the funding was more than it was originally. If we vote on these, how are we gonna approve the funding? It's because if that project, because, you know, it gets more expensive, that's my concern. But I mean, if it's because they're not getting it to us in a timely manner, let's fix that problem. But I'm concerned with the funding and the process of it. I know when the half-cent sales tax first came out, you know, some of us on the council, Richard, I don't know if you remember this, we were trying to borrow the money to get on that project, but we didn't start getting the money till October. So October was already too late. So if the timing is all wrong, I don't know if we can fix that. I don't feel comfortable with 3 years. I really, really don't. And I don't feel comfortable with not being able to vote on all of it, because if we vote on that particular, this amount of money and you need more, then what will happen? And what happens to the things that don't get done? Where are they at? Do they get moved to the next year like they have been? Those are just questions I have. I applaud staff, I applaud a change, but I think you gotta work with us a little bit here to help us understand the change and not take it as a negative. Just take it as this is a new change and we need to get a complete understanding and look at the fact of these are just some of the things that had happened before. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, thank you. Is there other discussion on the proposal? Ms. Elisla?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I applaud the 3-year. I'm actually surprised that we're not looking at 5. When you look at corporate America and you look at proper strategic planning, a corporation typically goes ahead and takes into account not 1, not 2, not 3, but actually 5, because it helps establish the vision of where an organization is going and where the funds are going to be allocated towards. The concern of making a budget and establishing a budget and thinking that maybe as time passes by, the dollars allocated are not gonna be sufficient, there's an index of change that you add to every year that you add to the budget, because you do have the understanding that the project will be more because the cost of materials may be more, and sometimes you're even lucky and the cost of materials can be less, or you could bid for less. But it gives the organization a time period, it gives a proper plan and transparency as to where things are headed into the future. So I am very happy to see the 3-year budget. The other thing that I would like to remind my colleagues is that although a budget is put in paper and approved, a budget is a benchmark. It is an expectation of where we would like to achieve. And it's, of course, something that can be modified and should be revisited on a regular basis. So those are my comments. I do support the 3 years, and I appreciate all of staff's work.
Mrs. Eller?
If I can, this has really been good discussion. The concern that I have about this particular half-cent sales tax budget is not those issues. I think it's wonderful. In fact, I think we're at a point where 2019 is when that sales tax ends. And so to be able to plan it all the way out, to be able to look at what's been done, and to look at what we want all the way out with understanding reasonable cushions, we're at a point where we had a whole book of what we thought we could do that was an adopted 10-year plan. We have not kept up with that plan. And there have been a lot of good reasons why those things changed. So it's not a critique of that either. When I ask questions about the numbers that were in this budget, what I'm telling you is the numbers changed between what was in our book that was just reissued on June 3rd, what I got last Friday, and what I got today. The numbers, because it's new, it's not even being, that critical, but there are, for instance, four projects that carried over from last year into this year. And I said, well, you've got Kansas Avenue pushed, it was authorized last year too, but it's pushed forward into 15 and 16. Where are those four projects that we're finishing this year? And between Friday and today at 4:45, another $2 million has been credited out of the 2013 item. Also, this tax ends on September 30th, 2019, and a full year's worth of revenue was in there. I simply asked the question, and it just needs to be adjusted. The numbers just, the more we ask questions, the more staff delved into that. There was a project that, I stay on top of these in general for my district, but sometimes for others as well. And so if my residents or somebody else says, when are they gonna do Topeka Boulevard, for instance, from 7th to 11th Street, I check. And I had an email from January of this year, 2014, that said, we're gonna do it in 2016. When I looked at this plan, it wasn't there. And so I asked, well, where's it gonna be? In this afternoon at 4:45, it's now in there for 2017. Those kinds of things are important to me to just know what we're doing, where we're going with it. And I thought to you as well. Typically this, if we can get this CIP as we transfer so that we can do it before budget, I'm okay with that. We're transitioning, the staff is working really hard to gather data from the past and get their arms around this. And with as much as the numbers changed, I was able to get the past data for this one, even though we didn't get it for the others. I just got it today. And so to look at that, the other thing that's happening, we had the question earlier on about whether it was okay to, the smaller pieces in this one were always the alleys, the curb and gutter replacements, and the ADA ramps. This book keeps them separate, but it added $1 million a year to take out of this money, or the proposal verbally was that $1 million a year would go to snow removal instead of construction. I wanted to see what that meant in terms of projects that were done, where we were with this whole plan, and what we would lose if we used it for snow removal instead of construction. So I felt I needed to ask those questions. What has happened, and these are lovely budgets, that this one was the one from Friday, and then when I got the background, I got a longer one today. But staff has collapsed the curb and gutter and alleys and ADA ramps all together, and the sum total is even more than was in this book. It's $3 million for in this new one that they sent. It's $2 million for 2014, which is not what our approved budget was. Then it goes to $3 million for 2015 and 2016. Those only added up like to $1,050,000 or something before. So I have questions about that, that's all, and I thought you would as well.
Other comments? Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Councilmember Hiller made many comments about the changing budget and all that. I think it's important to understand the transition of that information and how it changed based on questions. Yeah, Brandon, I don't know if I'm kind of putting you on the spot. If you could kind of just walk through what occurred and why the numbers were different and what it actually represents in terms of numbers.
Thank you, Mayor and council members and Mr. Manager. I think what we tried to give out was a full forecast, a 5-year forecast moving forward with cash flow projections of what we're estimating we'll receive. And then it's also a complete budget too, and not just the CIP portion. So in addition to your CIP portion, you also have other costs that are included in your budgets there, such as personnel costs for engineering time that is charged to those projects. And then you also have engineering estimates for design and everything that's typically included in the budget, not in the CIP. So I think that's where some of the number changes might be. There was a change to from cash to fund balance so that I could tie back to the CAF, or I think I explained that a little bit
Yeah.
in the email, so,
If I
Okay.
may, Mayor,
Well, okay, I'm just gonna,
Okay.
Councilwoman Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll be brief. I had some questions about the 2 years going to 3 years, and I talked to several different people, especially in my district, Bartlett and West, particularly has been on here, and I can, call on someone and ask about the city projects pretty easily. I understood from even talking to a former city council person who's now on the county commission, that there was a issue with a bridge that we needed the 3 years, and I had said something to several other people, and that was one of the reasons that, we did go from a 2-year CIP to the 3-year. Is that correct, or I know I'm not making this up, but was there something to do with the bridge construction that that encouraged it to go to a 3-year? And I think it had to do with the half-cent sales tax that we were collecting with the county.
I can't speak to a bridge. Where it came from more, from my perspective when I came in a year ago, is, might as well talk about the project, is 21st Street. We designed it and then went right into construction, and then it sat there for 3 or 4 months because we had to wait for AT&T to move a line. Now, that's not putting blame on AT&T. AT&T had to move the line, and the road sat there, and nothing was going on, and obviously that became a very big hot button. So as we look at that project, and as I talk with my counterparts over at the county, my county counterpart works on a 3-year basis. That first year is design. Then the second year, you've got to buy right-of-way for a lot of projects, in a lot of cases, and the utilities have got to move. The other thing that's happening is you've got a tighter economy. The utilities won't do anything until you have full plans. They used to work off of, 60% plans or something like that. We have Kansas Gas now, and AT&T tell us, when you've got your final plans, you give them to us. Then we'll move we'll plan our project. And so you've got that effect. And it's not small change for them either. I think it was close to $1 million project for AT&T up there in 21st. So that's, to me, kind of how the 3-year came in. And then the 3rd year, we should be able to go in and construct the road because all of the utilities are moved other than possibly water and, of course, storm sewer because they're under the road. So we've got to work those together. But anything behind curb would be taken care of.
I'll follow up.
Yeah, for
Well,
sure.
And I support the 3-year. And I really want to commend the new staff, the new financial staff that has been put together, working with all of our department heads, because you've come up with a really good document. A lot of people don't understand the numbers, and there's a lot of things in here, but I really appreciate, I know budget work is always very difficult, and they're always moving targets, so thank you.
I'm sorry, Ms. Everhart?
Thank you, and I just wanted to follow up on something Brandon said with the changing numbers. He's in the middle of a conversation, so. I wanted to follow up with Brandon on what you said about the changing numbers, because what I think I heard you say is you were answering questions, and so when some of those numbers changed, it wasn't because it changed as far as the CIB or the CIP, you were adding in total dollars and some other things. So some of those numbers changed for that reason. I think that's what I heard you saying when you were trying to collect this information to send out to somebody. Is that correct?
yeah, what I'm trying to build there is a complete budget,
Right.
basically a budget outlook for current year to the end of the CIP.
And I appreciate that. And I have to commend the staff too, because I know that there may be additions or changes that have to be made on the budget as we go along, whether it's the CIP and CIB or it's just the budget. But in my past years, I can think of a year when I had 15 corrections to the budget in a budget book. And we didn't really ever know if the numbers we were getting were correct. So I think you've done a wonderful job, and I just want to applaud you, because I think this is great, and I'm ready to move forward. Thank you.
if I may, while we're giving all the accolades, I have a question here that, on page 9, which is the city half-cent sales tax repair, the total amount for 2015 says 16 million to, and then 60,000,004, 60,000,006. Okay? Are you together on, are you?
I'm sorry.
And I actually, this is probably more of a finance question.
Okay.
Than public works question. It says what the total funds available, they say 16.2, you see that?
Subtotal half cent.
Yeah, well, on page 6, and we have always been stating, we collect 13.8 million a year. We've been saying that for years, and we say in your quarterly report, you say we expect to get 13.8 million this year. Is this, my first self-explanation, is this carryover that we're not spending? And how are we going to have that much carryover? It looks like we went up to 16 million, which is 2.4 million in one year, and we're staying there every year. You see what I'm saying?
Mr. Mayor, part of that is carryover. So when the projects or the collection started, there weren't as many projects that started. So there was a cash balance that built up. And then also, my understanding is with 2014, there's some projects that were planned, but will probably have to be pushed out and due to design and everything going on. So that will generate some more carryover that will be moved forward, and then those projects will be planned accordingly.
So we can start saying, we collect 13.8 a year, but we really can spend 16 million a year, which is what you're saying here, correct? That's what these figures say. We can start having budgets of 16.4 for next year, 16.6, 16.8.
Because of a cash carryover.
Okay,
Yes.
but I think if you ever spend that, it will no longer carry over. But okay, it's just curious to me because we've always used the figures 13.8, but now we're spending at 16.
And we're estimating revenues of around, 13.8 moving, and then more as moving forward. However, you still have the cash sitting in that fund, so we
Yeah.
utilize that balance to plan more projects moving forward. So you have to increase the budget to plan for those.
I just think, but when we start with a 3-year plan, we'll probably get to the point where we can spend everything that we have budgeted, which means there'd be no carryover. So at that point, we might have to go back down, but that's really, I just want to point that out because I think it's a discrepancy between the two different parts of the budget document. So thank you. Are there any other questions? We have a motion before us. Do you want to close on that, Ms.
I
Heller?
do, if we could. I really appreciate so much the staff's work. I started from exactly the concern that Mayor Walgast has, was how can we have $2.5 million more per year to spend than we have coming in, and I needed to understand it. Partly it goes back to the fact that we had to wait a year before we even started to implement because we had to accumulate the cash. So we obviously had to have 13 million, let's say, at the beginning of the year. So we had the cash in hand to do that season's projects. I am concerned, we're halfway through, and so I have before you, and they didn't send it to anybody but me, but I have all the information that any of us might, well, for the street projects, we'd still need breakdown on alleys and so on, but to look and see how far we are. With the proposal the way it is, we will only actually have 9 construction seasons, and so it's a time when we could choose to spend that last year and after the money's all accumulated in 2019, the year later, because we did have to wait. So there are just lots of moving parts that I think the staff finally nailed all the numbers. I had been given 3 different starting balances for 2014. We got it nailed. We figured out where it came from and got it one that I think will not change at this point. And then complete numbers on where that money goes in this chart that we've got so that everybody could see it. And so fundamentally, you all don't have what I have. It's a really good document. There are logically some good questions out of it, and I hoped that everyone would want to see it before we
Okay.
voted. Thank you.
Now, and the motion before us is to defer the entire 1/2 cent sales tax budget until September the 16th. We agree that's the item that we're voting on, correct? We have a motion and a second on that item. Is there any other discussion? If not, all those in favor vote yes. Opposed? I'm sorry. Mr. Brown.
As much as I would like to, I'm not going to, but I got
It's stiff for you.
Now, we have an old system. You have to be
That's all
patient
right,
with
I'm an
it.
old guy, so
New.
it's all right. I do not feel sufficiently prepared to vote on this
Okay,
issue. I'm
so
going
you
to
will,
abstain.
you'll abstain. Okay, we understand that. So then, on the motion, all those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no.
No, it's on.
I need to wind off.
We have 6 yes, Ortiz and Hiller voting,
No.
excuse me, 6
It's
no,
reversed.
Ortiz and Hiller voting yes.
6 having voted no, the amendment is defeated. Do you want to make the amendment proposal then, number 2 on snow removal?
I would, thank you.
And
I would
you have a
move,
copy there in front of you, council members.
move to add a sentence to the language on page 75 of the plan under the section project description. That would simply say, no snow removal will be allowed with these funds without a public vote.
And that is a motion.
That is the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Mrs. Everhart?
Well, I think we discussed this before, and if I recall, I guess I know that we had different legal person here, but I think we discussed this before, that it was determined that snow removal is and can be used under the maintenance language that we have. I just want to refresh my memory on that there is no reason that we have to not use snow removal. I mean, which I think is what this is about. Because I would oppose this because it's my understanding that it was already looked at and legal determined that it was adequate to do it this way.
Do you want to comment on that,
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Deputy?
My understanding is that Mr. Sublette did issue an opinion that half-cent sales tax could be used for snow removal.
Okay. Mr. Schmidt?
I agree with the idea that snow removal is a vital part of maintenance. I actually am going to vote in favor of this amendment because of the fact that this is half-cent sales tax money. And while legally we may be okay with the idea of street maintenance, including snow removal, I don't think that was the intent of the voter, and I don't think that was how it was presented to the voter. I'm fine with using maintenance funds for snow removal. I'm not fine with using half-cent maintenance fund, half-cent sales tax maintenance, or half-cent sales tax funds for this purpose. We're about to, well, the county is about to bring another proposed half-cent sales tax before the voters, and I think it's important that we not only adhere to the letter of those resolutions when we have an entire community vote on them, but also that we adhere strenuously to the intent of those. And I don't think snow removal fits within that intent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other comments or discussion? Mr. Harmon?
Thank you, Your Honor. This question's for legal staff. The half-cent sales tax was put before the voters in an election, and they voted to approve it. I mean, legally, could it be put back to the voters? You know, we're not asking to, I mean, is it even feasible to put back before the voters and say, sales tax cannot be used for X, Y, Z?
Well, we would have to follow the statutes and bring it back before the voters, again, probably an amendment to, or a new proposition, but it would have to come from this body or by a petition of the citizens.
But it, okay, so the entire tax would have to be revoted on,
Correct.
not just, is it okay or not okay to use it for X, Y, Z? We'd have to
That's correct.
put the whole ballot.
You have to
issue-
start all over again,
All right, That's what
essentially.
I thought. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mrs. Schwartz?
I'll just be real quick, because this is one of the things that I think we got the most calls on this year, and this year especially. So I have a question for Doug. What are the repercussions if we take the snow money out?
We'll get lots of phone calls. I don't know, I think that's, you know, this was to try to improve our snow plan and be able to do more in the residential areas, was what the purpose of this was.
You know, I might ask, with that additional money, how do you have a plan how you would expend it? In other
Yes.
words, this is giving more money for snow removal.
Yes.
What's it going to do?
Well, it would allow us to enhance what we do and also utilize funds as far as equipment. We'd have to use this for labor, you know, from that standpoint, but also if we go in and really start plowing our residential neighborhoods like we should be, we're gonna kill our equipment, because our equipment is already old. So we've gotta make some improvements in our equipment in order to be able to do more in the residential areas. And we've worked out, you know, started working out a plan. This is not adding staff, but this is how we better use our equipment and get out there and do more.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Elisla?
Thank you, Mayor. Doug, just for people that are watching from home, I, like Councilman Schmidt, I'm kind of concerned at the fact that when the vote was passed, the vote was not passed with that specific intent. At the same time, I do understand that one of the biggest concerns that is supposed to be addressed is what people call the potholes. Could you please give us a brief explanation so that we can all understand the impact of snow removal and the creation of potholes?
Okay. Well, obviously, the snow, obviously, the more, you know, snow material and all that lays on the roads, obviously, it's gonna melt, and it's just more, and if we've got holes, cracks, anything in the pavement and that water gets through the surface, it's gonna go down to the sub-base. The sub-base gets saturated, that's when we get the potholes, is primarily because everything gets soft, and so then everything just starts failing underneath.
So, Mayor, may I please approach him? So, can I just estimate by this that adding additional funds to snow removal, and even including residential areas, would then in turn result on a lesser incidence of these potholes, therefore saving us money by being preemptive?
I don't know as I want to go on the line that it'll totally reduce potholes or, you know, but it will help to preserve the roads and, you know, from that standpoint. The other is just, a lot of it is just our citizens trying to get in and out of their areas.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're trying, you know, and it's sitting there and they can't get around in the heavier snows. I mean, we try to use more of an enhanced salt, which is also less, you know, that when we say salt, it's an enhanced salt that basically shouldn't tear up our roads like you can just with pure salt. And we can get it to melt down, you know, at lower temperatures. If we can turn that lower amounts of snow into water, get it into the gutters and into the stormwater systems, that's the better way to, you know, to go. But when we get the deeper snow, we've just gotta move it, you know, to get it out of the road.
Thank you very much.
Is there other discussion on the item? We have before us the motion to add a sentence that no snow removal will be allowed with these funds without a public vote. It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? If not, all those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no.
We have 5 no, Hiller, Brown, Ortiz, and Schmidt voting yes.
5 having voted no, it does not pass. The third item is the South Fire Station. If you would like to move that as an amendment.
I would, and it's not an issue of support for the fire station, it's making sure that we don't lock it into a 3-year capital budget without knowing for sure that we can support it. The reason I proposed the date of September 16th was that we have a gap of about 3 weeks between the date that we vote in the operating budget and when we meet again, so I'm just trying to give some time. That's optional for me. The proposed motion would be defer action on this item until September 16, bringing it back only if funds for equipment and operating budgets have been committed.
Thank you. That is the motion. Is there a second? Hearing none, there is no motion. The fourth item is the levy funding.
Levy funding. The motion would be to amend, on page 47, amend item number 9 on that page. It's called Project Schedule and Estimate, and number 10, Amount by Source of Financing, to reflect that, per the staff report, $4.8 million has been accumulated in reserves for this purpose, and that $800,000 per year is being added to that reserve, and that borrowing to complete this project should not be required. I did not try and redo that sheet myself, so that motion would be to direct staff to appropriately amend that sheet.
Okay, and so your motion is this, what is in bold
What-
type here?
Yes,
in
it is
number
what's in
4.
bold type, because what you've
It
got,
refers to, yeah. I
it would
think so.
change this chart and it would change this
Yeah.
piece as well, and I did not try and do it.
Yeah, I'm just making sure for the
Correct.
clerk, for the record, what the motion is. You've heard that motion. Is there a second? Mrs. Schwartz seconds. Yes, you like to speak to that?
My question is for Doug again, as to what does this do when we're, the levy funding? If this passes, what does this mean?
What this $8 million for is the match on the federal WARDA funds that would bring the levies, address the deficiencies in the levies that the Corps of Engineers has identified through their study and design. And so this is our matching funds. They're putting in like 16 somewheres million dollars. We put in the 8, and that gives us about a $24–25 million project. We have been setting aside the $800,000 per year since, to build up close to $4.8 million, and we are continuing to set that money aside. The WARDA right now has gone through the Senate and the House. It's gone through a joint committee. I don't know as it's gone any further at this point, whether it's gotten to the president's desk or whatever, but then that's just that the WARDA has been passed. Then then Congress has to appropriate funds. Will they do that in 15? Will they do that in 16? We don't know. Once the funds are appropriated, then the Corps' got to go back and finish the design. So we could be out to 17 before, 16, 17, before we would ever need our matching funds. And so I think we had it as both, because at the same time, we've got other things going on with the levies, with our FEMA certification and like that, and we're setting all this cash over here, and we may have to borrow some now. So by leaving this as a option to go either way, if this just keeps getting postponed, we could use our cash for other things and not borrow money until we get to where we need this $8 million. And hopefully we wouldn't have to. The goal is to stay, cash-based, but there's a lot of things going on right now with our levies that obviously FEMA, the certification is affecting our flood insurance for those behind the levees. And then we've also got the WARDA that we just don't know when it's gonna happen.
Okay, thank you.
And if I can add, I know for those that have been here years, we have discussed this every year in the budget process. We set it aside, and then we have all that over there. We have these needs. We can use it. And so we've gone sort of through this on a yearly basis. And actually now, as we learned from Congress, it's closer now than it's ever been by far. And we now begin to see, like in 2 or 3 years, we will need it. And so I think from all this together, we want to be able to use cash if possible, but whenever it comes down, we've got to be able to go. And we've got to have the funds available to show, to get the feds to do their share. So, you know, it's one of those like that. Yeah, Mrs. Delisla?
Thank you, Mayor. And this is just one of those that even though it sounds like we're talking about Congress and we're talking about waters and things, it really affects our citizens. I can tell you for a fact, and I think I've said this before in several meetings, I know people that are gonna have to be paying $1,000 more on insurance, just on flood insurance because of this situation. I wouldn't put any brakes on anything that would allow us the facilitation of these dollars right now.
Okay, is there other discussion? You want to close? Ms. Everhart, yes.
I just want to make sure I understand. This language is changing some wording in the book, as I understand, but does it actually restrict your use? Is there anything about this language that is of concern to you?
No, I think what I understand the motion is that we take out the financing portion of this, and this is only done cash. And if we, you know, that we could only do this funding with cash for this 8 million, if I'm understanding the motion, or the change, or the amendment, I'm sorry, amendment, whatever.
Well, that's
it
what
is.
I'm not understanding either, because language like, I guess that's the lawyer in me, language like borrowing should not be required doesn't say you may not, you know, there is no borrowing. It doesn't say that. So I'm trying to figure out, is this really restricting us from borrowing or not? And I need somebody to answer that question. In the event that you had to, that's what I want to know.
Yeah.
I have the
yes,
book.
Legal.
But I don't have the advantage of your motion.
Oh.
Can you pass it down?
I sent some, I thought. They're sitting right here. There you go. It's just
And I
too
think
big.
in
Sorry.
it, and it is page 2 of the set. And it's the 4th one down, the legal levy.
I don't think it really mandates anything. I think it's more aspirational and adding additional information, but I agree with you. Borrowing to complete this project should not be required. That's just, it shouldn't be required, but it's not shall not be required. So I don't really think it has any kind of a legal effect.
Okay, thank you.
It's more purposeful.
Correct.
All right. Mrs.
If
Heller?
I may, I mean, in part, this was started by me checking because we have talked about it every year, and I wondered, you know, there's been discussion of spending that savings or not, and I wondered whether we still had it, and it turned out that we did. And so as for this one in particular, because it's so important and we need to have it ready, it seemed if we really did have it, and the intent really was to set aside another $800,000 a year for it every year, then to me, it's very straightforward to just say that. And that with this one, because we've talked about it so much, and then others as it comes along, I'd rather be straight up about whether we're saving the money or whether we're gonna borrow, and if something happens and we need to change our minds, we can do that, we can always do that. But it's just confusing to kind of, it's been so nebulous, did we have it or did we not, that clarifying if we really did have it just seemed more straightforward for the budget.
Mr. Brown?
I just wanted to ask Councilwoman Hiller, and she's explained a little bit of my question, but I honestly, and I'm not a lawyer, so maybe that's the reason, I don't understand this amendment. It's not requiring anything. The language, I'm just asking, would you entertain changing the language to your motion to make it a substantive motion will not be used, and that way we're making a decision on what we're doing, because otherwise I don't see that we're doing anything.
If I may, the intent, I didn't, if we take all the financing out, there's money in this $8.925 million that is debt reserve funds. If we don't bond it, we don't need that $786,000. because I was still gathering information, I didn't have time to ask somebody to help prepare that document beforehand. In number 10, it would simply not say revenue bonds anymore. The direction, the intent of my motion was to have staff correct this sheet to reflect the fact that we already had the cash and that it was gonna end up being cash and that we didn't need to borrow the money.
I'm just a second, what year is this? Which page is this on?
On page 47.
No, I'm sorry, on as far as the years, on these pages 7 and 8?
2016. 2016, so it is it's a project that we would have authorized
Okay, that was
as
my
part of our
thinking.
3-year budget. And it's $9 million. 8 point
Well, but
whatever.
my thinking is that as what the city manager has said earlier, that we would use all available possibilities to not pay cash and not have to borrow. And we don't, and this is probably less definite than many of the other things in this budget, because we don't know when it's going to go through the feds.
Yes.
And so that's what I'm just thinking where you are, you know, this may not come before us for 2018. So that's just my thinking that, this is probably more fluid than a lot of these other things that we talk about that's in here tonight.
Well, I picked it out because it is one that we've worked on so much and that is so critical. And it was just troublesome for us to, if what we discussed tonight was that by approving this CIP and approving the CIB and then turning right around and giving the project budget authorizations for 3 years worth of, the first 3 years of all of this, that we would see on an annual basis, but we'd already authorized bonding it. It takes us out of the loop of being refreshed on where we are with what's in reserve and what we need to bond and what we've got the cash for. And particularly in the utilities, that comes up a lot. And so it seemed if we were sure that we had the money for this one, we didn't need to say that.
Okay, and we do have, a few more comments. We have to change the tape, so we're gonna take a recess in about 5 minutes. So I'd like to be able to, maybe we can pull this together before that. Mrs. Everhart.
Well, just quickly, then, I guess I need legal to look at this, because I have an objection then to the motion, because in the sense of the form of the motion, because I thought I heard Councilwoman Hiller say she didn't have the language and she was going to go to staff to get them to put the language in for the motion. Well, I'm not voting on something that staff is going to actually have to put the language together. So I think there's a disconnect here that needs to be addressed. We need to know exactly what we're voting on, and I'm not sure that I have any idea what this motion is. So maybe while the tape's being changed, Councilwoman can get with staff, but I really have an objection to the motion.
Well, we have a motion on the floor, that we can vote up or down on. Councilman Schmidt?
Well, I have a possible alternative way of dealing with this. I agree that if we've been setting money aside and we've got $4.8 million and we're going to have probably the total amount necessary for this project, we should pay for that in cash. I don't think that this is the appropriate way to designate that. I think perhaps a more straightforward and clear way would be outside of this process for us to say that this fund will be directed only as matching funds for the levy project. And we can pass that by resolution or some other ordinance at some other point. And then those funds cannot be used for anything other than that purpose. And we tie that purpose, which is their intended purpose, to that fund specifically, rather than trying to do this through kind of complex and possibly problematic language in the actual budget proposal. I would suggest maybe withdrawing that and presenting at another time a definitive budget or definitive fund for just that purpose.
So you're saying that we would pass it as is right now, and then we could take care of this later?
Pass as is right now, and we'll come back with a resolution that says the funds that have already been accumulated, plus the additional $800,000 that's being set aside every year, will go towards the matching funds sources for the levy, and move that discussion outside of the CIP process.
Okay, we have to take a recess at this point. So let's go with about 10 minutes, try to be back by 20 after. Thank you.
Oh, you think, is this a minute to change the tape? Oh, yeah.